Somewhere tonight, a woman is lying in the dark, turning something over in her mind. And that something is a thing you said, possibly weeks ago, possibly longer. She is not replaying the moment you looked your best. She is not thinking about what you wore or how the evening went. She is turning over one specific sentence. Something quiet. Something that arrived without fanfare. And every time it comes back, it produces the same feeling in her chest that it produced the first time she heard it. You almost certainly do not know this is happening. And the reason you do not know is not that you were not paying attention. The reason is that the compliments capable of doing this do not feel significant when they leave your mouth. They do not feel like carefully crafted words. They feel like an observation you simply could not keep to yourself. Here is what most men have never been told. There is a fundamental difference between the compliments that disappear within hours and the ones that stay for months. That difference is not about effort or timing or confidence. It is about something much more specific, and once you understand it, you will never hear the word compliment the same way again. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what the two types are, why they work where everything else fades, and what they quietly tell a woman about the man who gave them. You have probably given a compliment that landed beautifully. She smiled, she looked at you differently, something shifted in the room. And then 3 weeks later, it was as if it never happened. That is not because she forgot you. That is because certain compliments are built to be forgotten. Think back to a moment like that. The warmth was real. The reception was genuine. But something about that exchange did not leave a mark. Not the kind that comes back. And the reason has nothing to do with how sincere you were, or how well you knew her, or whether the timing was right. It has to do with a specific property of the compliment itself, and whether it traveled along a pathway in her brain that leads to lasting memory, or one that leads to a polite, brief warmth and then nothing. Appearance-based compliments, the ones about her eyes, her smile, the way she looks tonight, have been received by her brain thousands of times before you ever opened your mouth. That repetition has carved a very efficient processing pathway. Hear it, feel the brief warmth, release it. The brain does not waste energy on long-term storage of information it has processed 1,000 times already. Familiarity is the enemy of memory, and most compliments men give are, to the female brain, deeply familiar. The compliments that stay travel a different route entirely. To understand why some words stay and others evaporate, you need to understand something about the way a woman's brain actually decides what is worth keeping. The brain does not store everything equally. It makes decisions, constantly, automatically, below the level of conscious awareness, about what is worth the energy of long-term retention. And the criteria it uses are more specific than most people realize. Memory researchers studying emotional consolidation, the process by which certain experiences get transferred from short-term awareness into long-term storage, have found consistently that two factors drive deep encoding above almost everything else: emotional significance and self-relevance. The more personally meaningful a piece of information feels, and the more directly it connects to a person's understanding of who they are, the more thoroughly the brain commits it to lasting memory. For women, this process has a particular feature that makes verbal content especially powerful. Female identity tends to be more verbally integrated than male identity, meaning that women are more likely to understand and process their own sense of self through language, through the words they use internally to describe who they are. When a statement arrives from outside that touches this interior verbal self-portrait, when someone names something she has quietly known about herself but never heard named, the brain does not process it as social input. It processes it as autobiographical information. It files it alongside her most formative experiences, not alongside passing compliments exchanged at a dinner table. That is the distance between a compliment that disappears and one that replays. Of course, this does not mean that every deep-sounding compliment will produce this effect. The content has to be accurate, it has to be specific, it has to arrive from genuine observation rather than from a desire to impress. But the mechanism, the reason it works when it works, is this. You gave her brain something genuinely new to store. Something it had not processed 1,000 times before. Something that felt, to some quiet part of her, like being recognized. Which brings us to the first of the two compliments, because it is built entirely around this principle, and once you understand it, you will recognize immediately why it works where everything else fades. There is something she knows about herself, has known for a long time, that almost no one has ever said out loud to her. Not because it is hidden, because it requires a quality of attention that most people simply do not bring to their interactions with her. Every woman carries interior qualities she has privately observed in herself across years of living. Qualities that are real, that matter, that shape how she moves through the world, but that almost no one has ever named to her directly. Not because those around her are blind, but because naming interior qualities requires a level of sustained, specific attention that most social interaction simply does not reach. Her particular way of staying calm when a conversation becomes difficult, not the false calm of someone suppressing, but a genuine groundedness that other people in the room can feel without understanding where it comes from. The specific quality of honesty she carries, not blunt, not cruel, but direct in a way that somehow leaves the other person feeling respected rather than exposed. The way she listens, not just with patience, but with an active quality of presence that makes the person speaking feel that what they are saying actually matters. These are things she knows about herself. She has seen them in action. She may have felt quietly proud of them in moments when no one was watching. And in most cases, across most relationships, no one has ever held them up to the light and named them precisely. When you do that, when you say something like, "The way you stayed steady in that moment without anyone asking you to," that is not something most people are capable of. She does not simply receive a compliment. She receives confirmation of something she has carried alone. And that confirmation lands in a completely different place than anything you could say about how she looks. Now here is what gets this wrong. The version of this compliment that fails is the one that gestures at the category without entering the specific. "You are so strong. You are really empathetic. You are such a good listener." These are outlines. They point in the right direction, but they do not arrive anywhere. She has heard versions of these before too, and her brain processes them with the same efficiency it processes appearance compliments, quickly, warmly, and with very little retention. What makes the first compliment work is precision that could only have come from actually watching her. The compliment has to be specific enough that she knows, not suspects, knows, that you are paying a different kind of attention than she is used to receiving. That you were not scanning for something nice to say, that you saw something real. The precision matters in ways that go beyond just making the compliment feel more genuine. And the second compliment takes this even further, because it names something she did not even know was visible. The second one requires something different from you, not just attention, but a specific kind of attention that most men have never been asked to develop. And when you give it, the effect is unlike anything a conventional compliment can produce. The second compliment names something she was not aware she was showing, not a quality she has consciously developed and privately recognized, something operating below the surface of her own self-awareness, a pattern of behavior she enacts without management, without performance, without any intention of it being seen. Consider what this looks like in practice. She is at a gathering and, without anyone asking, without drawing attention to herself, she quietly repositions herself to stand near the person at the edge of the room who has gone slightly too quiet. She does not announce this. She may not even be conscious of doing it. She is simply responding to something she sensed, without naming it. Or she is in a conversation that has become tense, and her voice, without any visible decision on her part, drops half a register and slows almost imperceptibly, and the tension in the room follows it downward. She did not choose to do that. It came from somewhere deeper than choice. When you observe something like this and name it, when you say, "I noticed that you moved toward him before anyone else in the room had registered that he needed it, and I don't think you even knew you were doing it," you are doing something that almost no one ever does for another person. You are reflecting back a truth about her that exists beneath the layer she manages and presents. There is no prepared response for this. There is no deflection available. It lands because it is true in a way that she herself had not fully seen. Remember what I said at the very beginning? That there is a specific type of thing you can say to a woman that she will carry with her for months, and the reason most men never say it is not what they think? This is that thing. Not a line, not a technique, a genuine observation given back to her from a place of real attention. The reason it cannot be manufactured is also the reason it is so powerful. You might be thinking, I can learn to observe these things and then use what I notice. And in one sense, yes, but there is a version of this that works and a version that quietly closes every door it was meant to open. Women carry an extremely refined sensitivity to the difference between words that emerge from genuine attention and words that were assembled to produce a particular effect. This sensitivity does not operate analytically. She is not consciously running a checklist while you speak. It operates as a felt sense, a subtle wrongness that registers somewhere before the conscious mind has formed a verdict. A compliment of this type, delivered as a technique, even a factually accurate one, carries a slightly different texture. It arrives at the wrong moment, or with too much smoothness, or with a quality of deliberateness that does not match the spontaneous thing it is pretending to be. And she feels that difference, even if she cannot name it. The error most men make upon learning this is to start scanning, to sit with a woman and look for something unusual to name, the way you might search a shelf for a specific book. And the scanning shows, not as a conscious signal, but as a quality of attention that is directed toward finding rather than toward seeing. She feels the difference between a man who is watching her in order to understand her and a man who is watching her in order to say something impressive. They feel completely different from the inside of the interaction. The shift that actually works is not a shift in what you say. It is a shift in how present you are willing to be. The capacity to notice the unconscious, her coping patterns, the specific way her generosity expresses itself, the behaviors she enacts without knowing she is enacting them. That capacity develops through genuine presence over time, not through technique. And when the observation finally comes, it comes naturally, without effort, and lands exactly as it should. Most men who struggle to give compliments that land are not failing because of something wrong with them. They are failing because they were handed a map that only shows the surface, and no one ever told them there was more beneath it. This is not a personal shortcoming. It is a gap in what male attention is culturally trained to observe. From very early in a man's life, the categories of noticing that receive reinforcement are almost entirely external. How she looks, how she carries herself, how she presents. The interior dimensions of a woman's character, the specific texture of her emotional intelligence, the way her values appear in small, unobserved moments, the patterns she enacts without awareness, receive no cultural framework at all. There is no language modeled for seeing these things. There are no examples of how to name them. Most men have simply never been shown that this layer exists, let alone how to read it. Which means developing this capacity is not about correcting something broken. It is about adding something that was never given to you in the first place. And the men who develop it, not as a strategy, but as a genuine way of being present with people, find that it changes not just how women respond to them, but how they experience relationships entirely. The 3 things worth beginning to watch. How she handles a small, private frustration when she thinks the moment is unremarkable. This reveals her actual coping architecture, not her managed one. The specific shape of her humor, not whether she laughs, but what kind of connection her mind makes to find something funny, which tells you more about how she thinks than almost anything else. And the direction of her care, who she moves toward when no one is requiring her to move anywhere, and what form that movement takes, because this is where her deepest values live. And when a woman begins to feel this quality of attention from you, not once, not as a technique, but as something consistent, as simply how you are present with her. Something changes in how she holds you in her mind that has no equivalent in any other kind of connection. She does not think about you the way she thinks about someone who told her she was beautiful. She thinks about you the way she thinks about an experience that changed something, quietly, permanently, in a way that is difficult to explain to anyone who was not there. She replays what you said not because she is analyzing it, but because it comes back on its own, the way a piece of music returns when you are doing something completely unrelated, and suddenly you are back inside the feeling it produced. The pull she feels toward you is quieter than what attraction usually feels like, and more persistent because of that quiet. It does not spike and fade, it builds. This is what genuine attention does to a woman's experience of a man. Not infatuation, which is loud and short. Something more like gravity, invisible, constant, increasing over time rather than diminishing. And it is produced by the simplest possible thing, the experience of being known, not admired, understood, not evaluated. Both compliments, when given from a real place, deliver that experience. The first names what she has always carried but never heard spoken. The second reflects back what she was expressing without knowing she was expressing it. Together they do something that most men spend years trying to achieve through other means. They make her feel, in a very specific and irreplaceable way, that you actually see her. You do not need to start monitoring every interaction for an opportunity. You do not need to rehearse anything. What you need is simpler and harder than that. To slow down enough to actually be present. To let your attention rest on who she is rather than on how she appears. And to trust that when you notice something real, the words will find their own way out. And when they do, she will hear them differently than she has heard anything else you have ever said. I want to ask you something before you go. Has there been a woman in your life, someone from your past or your present, who once said something that told you she had been paying a completely different quality of attention to you than you realized? One sentence that made you feel genuinely seen? Leave your answer below with one word: known. On this channel, we look at female psychology from the inside, not to give you strategies, but to give you real understanding of what is actually happening beneath the surface of your interactions with women. If that matters to you, stay close. In the next video, I am going to show you the one question women ask themselves about a man within the first few conversations, and how the answer to that question quietly determines everything that follows. Most men have no idea this question is even being asked. Make sure you are here for that one.